Okay, welcome. Welcome everyone to session number 207 of Kevin Reads A Course in Miracles. Today, we are on page 562 in the text. We are finishing chapter 26, which is entitled The Transition. And we will focus today on section 10, Roman numeral 10. It is entitled The End of Injustice. All right. And as I'm reading through this section, what's coming up for me is the practice in the Course in Miracles. A student would practice A Course in Miracles, basically noticing when I'm using the ego thought system as my guide. Just to notice that and then decide, is this what I want? And if not, I go inside to the Holy Spirit, the symbol of the memory of who I am, and I ask, help me to see correctly. I'm willing to have my perception corrected. And it starts with noticing that we have slipped back into the ego thought system, using the ego as the guide, instead of asking Jesus to be my guide or Holy Spirit. And that's the practice. And I think you'll hear Jesus alluding to that as we go along here. All right. The end of injustice. Paragraph 1. What then remains to be undone for you to realize their presence? Only this. You have a differential view of when attack is justified and when you think it is unfair and not to be allowed. When you perceive it is unfair, you think that a response of anger is now just. And thus you see what is the same as different. Confusion is not limited. If it occurs at all, it will be total. And its presence, in whatever form, will hide their presence. They are known with clarity or not at all. Confused perception will block knowledge. It is not a question of the size of the confusion or how much it interferes. Its simplest presence shuts the door to theirs and keeps them there, unknown. All right, just a little refresher. The there, T-H-E-I-R, and them refers to the face of Christ in the memory of God. All right, that was the subject, so to speak, of the last session, session 206, in the section called For They Have Come. All right, Jesus was telling you they're already here. All right, the face of innocence, which the face of Christ, which is the symbol of innocence, everyone's innocence. The innocence of the oneness, which leads automatically to the memory of God. Right. And he says, so what remains? What remains to be undone for you to realize their presence? He says, they're already here, so what do you have to do to realize it? He says, only this. He says, you have a differential view of when attack is justified. Right? When you think it is unfair and not to be allowed. When you think it is unfair and not to be allowed. When you perceive it as unfair, you think that a response of anger is now just. All right? So he tells us we still have these little bits where we think something has been done, something has been unfair to me, someone or something. Life is not fair, So some injustice has been done to me. He says, and you think that sometimes it's allowable, and sometimes it's not. He says, and then he says, thus what you see what is the same as different. All right. A view of when attack is justified, that's the ego. That's an ego interpretation. And when an attack is not to be allowed, that's an ego interpretation. He says, when you perceive it's unfair, you think that a response of anger is now just. He says, you're seeing everything through the eyes of the ego. Right? And he says, and this confusion is not limited. You may be having a great day, everything is beautiful, you're being very kind, very loving. Right? And then someone does or says something and you perceive an attack. You perceive it's an injustice, an insult, whatever. And he says that's that little bit of confusion that blocks out everything. He says that little bit of confusion. He says confusion is not limited. If it occurs, it will be total. So, I'm walking down the street and, I love everyone and everything is beautiful and my face hurts, I'm smiling so much. And next thing you know, somebody whizzes past me on a motorized scooter or something, almost knocks me down. All of a sudden that smile is gone from my face and I think that I'm justified in being angry. Look what they did. All right? Look what that person did. Look how uncaring they are. Look how unthinking they are. All these things. He says that confusion is not limited. That moment is not limited because it wipes out the presence of the face of Christ and the memory of God. It just wipes it out. All right? This confusion isn't limited. If it occurs at all, it will be total. And in its presence, in whatever form, and its presence, in whatever form, will hide their presence. All right? So even those little things that irk me, all right, or the big things that irk me a lot, all right? He says there's no difference. It doesn't matter. Remember, there's no order of difficulty. There's no hierarchy of illusions. An illusion is an illusion. All right. It says it blocks out the awareness of their presence. All right. He says they are known in clarity or not at all. All right. Confused perception will block knowledge. All right. That's what I mean by the practice of A Course in Miracles student is to just notice when you're blocking the awareness of the presence of innocence and the awareness of God. When that is not in your awareness, something's blocking it. All right? And it doesn't call for judgment. You don't start taking your own inventory, as they say. Well, I've been doing this for 30 years and I should know better. And all right. You remember, this time means nothing to the presence. Right? It doesn't matter how many years you're trying to do this. Right? You just notice that in this moment, I'm projecting guilt somewhere on someone or something. And I'd rather have their presence. I'd rather know of the innocence of the oneness and the memory of God. I would prefer that, please. Right? To thinking about what I would like to see happen to that person on the scooter. All right. So it's not a question of size of confusion. Its simple presence shuts the door to theirs. The presence of that resentment shuts the door to the awareness of their presence. Right? And it keeps them unknown. Right? So that's the practice, is to notice when I'm out of sorts, so to speak. And I ask myself, well, what is it I want, you know? Wouldn't you like to know? Wouldn't you like to be aware of your own innocence and the milieu of innocence in which we truly exist? And in the same instant, remember your Creator and your relationship to your Creator and the safety that brings and the happiness that brings. Paragraph 2. What does it mean if you perceive attack in certain forms to be unfair to you? It means that there must be some forms in which you think it's fair. For otherwise, how could some be evaluated as unfair? Some then are given meaning and perceived as sensible. And only some are seen as meaningless. And this denies the fact that all are senseless. All attacks are senseless. Equally without a cause or consequence, and cannot have effects of any kind. Their presence is obscured by any veil that stands between their shining innocence and your awareness that it is your own and equally belongs to every living thing along with you. God limits not, and what is limited cannot be heaven, so it must be hell. All right? He says, all attack is senseless. All right? He says, what does it mean if you think that some attacks against you are unfair? It means that, he says, it means that you think that sometimes attack is fair. Like when I'm doing it, when I'm attacking. You know, and attack is simply, it can be just the simplest projection of guilt or fault onto someone. Right? What we think is an innocent judgment. Oh, I'm only telling the truth. All right? It obscures their presence. All right? And he says, God doesn't limit you. And all these little judgments and little attacks, he says, they keep you here in hell. And if you don't think this is hell, so to speak, just wait. It'll dawn on you. All right, let's just put it this way. This is not heaven. All right. So I think that, you're unfair and I attack. And that's justified. He says, No, it's all senseless. That sense just keeps the ego going, just keeps the idea of separation going. Right? Paragraph 3, unfairness and attack are one mistake, so firmly joined that where one is perceived, the other must be seen. You cannot be unfairly treated. The belief you are is but another form of the idea you are deprived by someone, not yourself. Projection of the cause of sacrifice is at the root of everything, perceived to be unfair and not your just deserts. Yet it is you who ask this of yourself in deep injustice to the Son of God. You have no enemy except yourself. And you are enemy indeed to him because you do not know him as yourself. What could be more unjust than that he be deprived of what he is, denied the right to be himself, and asked to sacrifice his Father's love and yours as not his due? So he says, unfairness and attack are one mistake, so firmly joined that where one is perceived, the other must be seen. And when he says here in sentence 2, you cannot be unfairly treated, that's what Ken would call a level 1 statement. You really, in reality, where you truly exist, you can't be unfairly treated. It's only when I believe that I'm separated from that reality, right? When I'm separate from the oneness, that I start perceiving attack. And all I'm doing is projecting my own guilt over having attacked the oneness. See how it all fits? He says, you cannot be unfairly treated. And he goes, the belief that you are, right? The belief that I am unfairly treated is just another form of the idea that I am deprived by someone else, not me. All right? That I'm not responsible for it. In other words, I'm separate from God, but I didn't do it. And therefore, I have to suffer because of your stupidity. So he says, the belief that you are unfairly treated is but another form of the idea that you're deprived by someone else, not yourself. He says, so the projection of the cause of sacrifice is at the root of everything perceived to be unfair and not your just deserts. So what he's talking about, the projection of the cause of sacrifice, that's I project, I feel guilty that I decided to see myself as separate. And I so quickly repress that. And as Freud said, what is repressed has to be projected. And it's very quick, and the mind is very powerful. And I see it as I'm the victim of someone else. I'm deprived by someone, not myself. All right, that's the projection, and it's so deep and so quick. All right, and it's all a matter of training ourselves to catch it. Wait a second, I'm letting the ego teach me what the world is all about. All right, and that's projection, projecting my guilt. He says, and this projection of the cause of sacrifice, right, which is me, my mind, not Kevin, but the original mind, right? That part of my mind that said, oh, I think separation would be cool. I think I'll try it. And then I feel bad about it, and I think I'm going to get punished for it, so I got to say, oh no, it's you did it. He says that's the root of everything to be perceived as unjust and unjustified, and not your just deserts. All right, I become the innocent victim. I didn't do it. I'm here, but I didn't do it. And so it goes. All right. And then we become an enemy to everyone else that we project the guilt onto. Because we don't know them now in the oneness. We don't know them as ourselves. We see them as separate. So he says, and you're depriving them. All right? Because you don't know them as yourself. What could be more unjust than that the other person be deprived of what he is, denied the right to be himself, and asked to sacrifice his Father's love and yours as not his due. Right? And the world rolls on through projection. Right? And we feel that guilt on a deep level, and we have to project it. It becomes everybody else. Therefore, everybody else is unworthy of the love of God, unworthy to be who they really are. And that's why the practice is to notice when you're doing it, right? And when you notice that you're doing it, you don't compound the problem by condemning yourself, calling yourself names or something. You just point at it. As Pema Chodron would say, thinking, all right? Thinking with the ego, as we would say. Oh, there's the ego. What else would I do if I'm asking the ego to be my guide? And then I make the choice. Then I have that choice point. Help me to see correctly. I'm willing to see correctly. I'd rather become aware of their presence, the face of Christ and the memory of God. I'd rather become aware of the innocence of the oneness. Okay. Paragraph 4, which was always a sentence that I remember a lot of course students would always remember. Paragraph 4, beware of the temptation to perceive yourself unfairly treated. In this view, you seek to find an innocence that is not theirs, but yours alone, and at the cost of someone else's guilt. Can innocence be purchased by the giving of your guilt to someone else? And is it innocence that your attack on him attempts to get? Is it not retribution for your own attack upon the Son of God you seek? Is it not safer to believe that you are innocent of this and victimized despite your innocence? Whatever way the game of guilt is played, there must be loss. Someone must lose his innocence, that someone else can take it from him, making it his own. All right, he's just reiterating rather poetically and, beautifully written what we were just talking about. Because if I think I'm unfairly treated, right, now I'm looking for, I think I lost my innocence. Somebody took something from me. someone did something to me and I have to get it back. Right? He says, because in this view, which is the ego's point of view, he says you're looking for an innocence that's not theirs. That's not the true innocence of the oneness. Right? You're looking for something different. You're only looking for retribution. You're looking for some innocence that's yours alone. Like you have to patch up your self-image or something. And it's yours alone. It's not universal. It's not in the oneness. It says you're looking for an innocence that's not theirs, but yours alone, and at the cost of someone else's guilt. I have to get it back by making sure that they're guilty. Right? You did something to me. I have to get that back. I have to get that innocence back by pointing out the guilty party. Right? He says, and is it innocence that your attack upon him attempts to get? He says, is it really innocence that you're looking for? He says, isn't it retribution for your own attack upon the Son of God? He says, is it not retribution for your own attack upon the Son of God you seek? Is it not safer to believe that you are innocent of this and victimized despite your innocence? He said, so in this ego world, we think it's safer to think that I'm victimized despite my innocence. It's safer to believe that I never attacked the Son of God. I never attacked the oneness. In other words, I never attacked who I truly am by saying I'm an individual. I'm not part of the oneness. That's the attack on the Son of God, on yourself. And then we come down and here we are. We are victimized despite my innocence. Hey, I didn't do anything. I didn't do it. All right? I'm just smiling with childhood memories. Growing up in a large family. Wasn't me. He says, whatever way the game of guilt is played, there must be loss. All right? Someone must lose his innocence that someone else can take it from him, making it his own. All right? So if I think I get my innocence back by making you guilty, either way, somebody loses. And he says, that's not the true innocence. So he says, no matter how the game of guilt is played, there must be loss. All right? If there's any guilt getting passed around like a hot potato, I can see my wife grinning when I say potato. But it gets passed around like the hot potato. And everybody tries to get rid of the guilt. He says, no matter how you play that game, somebody loses. Somebody's getting burnt. Someone must lose his innocence that someone else can take it from him and make it his own. So that's the way of the world here. Paragraph 5. You think your brother is unfair to you because you think that one must be unfair to make the other innocent. And in this game, do you perceive one purpose for your whole relationship? And this you seek to add unto the purpose given it. The Holy Spirit's purpose is to let the presence of your holy guests be known to you. And to this purpose, nothing can be added, for the world is purposeless except for this. To add or take away from this one goal is but to take away all purpose from the world and from yourself. And each unfairness that the world appears to lay upon you, you have laid upon it by rendering it purposeless, without the function that the Holy Spirit sees. And simple justice has thus been denied to every living thing upon the earth. That's heavy. Right. So he's telling, this is where the course becomes that, it's obvious that it becomes this very psychological type of spirituality. Because Jesus is telling us, he says, look, you think your brother is unfair. You think he's guilty because you think that somebody has to be guilty in order to make the other one innocent. Right? Someone must be unfair to make the other innocent. And in this game, do you perceive one purpose for your whole relationship? So all the relationships we have one purpose. Is to find out that guilty party. No matter how you disguise it. In the end, that's what the purpose of the special relationship is. All right, is to grab what you perceive as your innocence by making the other party guilty, taking it from them. All right. Getting distracted by that change in the sunlight. Isn't that amazing? All right. So he says, in this game, the projection of guilt, do you perceive one purpose for your whole relationship? And this you seek to add upon unto the purpose given it. The Holy Spirit's purpose is to let the presence of your holy guests be known. Right? So the Holy Spirit's purpose, right, is forgiveness. It's to see the innocence. He says nothing else can be added to that. And he says, but you seek to add to the purpose given your relationship. The relationships, every relationship we have, really the purpose is to help us to see the innocence, the oneness, to help us realize their presence, the face of Christ and the memory of God. Every relationship. That's the function. But we think we want to add something to that. He says, but to that purpose, nothing can be added. All right? Because the world is purposeless except for this. The world has no purpose except to remind us of the oneness, remind us of our innocence. There is no other purpose. So to add or take away from this one goal is to take away all purpose from the world and yourself. And each unfairness that the world appears to lay upon you, you have laid upon it by rendering it purposeless. All right? We're projecting. He says, you've rendered it purposeless without the function that the Holy Spirit sees. Right? So without the function of forgiveness, the world is purposeless. And simple justice has been denied to every living thing on earth. So when I am using the ego as my guide, as my teacher, he says justice is denied to every living thing upon the earth. Right? There's no justice. Justice of the Holy Spirit is that you're not guilty. There is no guilt. He says, yet that's denied to everything if we look through the eyes of the ego. When I think that someone injustice is being done to me. Paragraph 6. What this injustice does to you who judge unfairly and who see as you have judged, he says, you cannot calculate. All right, let me read that again. What this injustice does to you who judge unfairly and who see as you have judged, you cannot calculate. The world grows dim and threatening. Not a trace of all the happy sparkle that salvation brings can you perceive to lighten up your way. And so you see yourself deprived of light, abandoned to the dark, unfairly left without a purpose in a futile world. The world is fair because the Holy Spirit has brought injustice to the light within. And there has all unfairness been resolved and been replaced with justice and with love. If you perceive injustice anywhere, you need but say, by this do I deny the presence of the Father and the Son, and I would rather know of them than see injustice, which their presence shines away. So he's talking about when we're seeing through the eyes of the ego, when we're projecting guilt, right? Because we think we're guilty, we think deep down inside, I'm the one that chose for separation. I have to get rid of that guilt. I mean, we're not even aware of that, right? But we keep projecting guilt, we keep finding fault. And he says, and what this injustice does to you, he says, you can't even calculate. He says, you have no idea what that thought has done to you or is doing to you. All right? That thought that I'm guilty and I have to get rid of it. All right? He says, the world grows dim and threatening. He says, there's no trace of all the happy sparkle that salvation brings. He says you can't perceive it to lighten up your way when you have that thought, a projection of guilt. And so you see yourself deprived of light. You see yourself abandoned to the dark, unfairly left without a purpose in a futile world. All right? Many people come to that conclusion as they grow, as they live. That, wow, there's no end. It's futile. There's nothing ever gets better. Right? And yet, by changing, having your mind changed, having your perception changed, right? There would be that sparkle that salvation brings. You would see a meaning and a purpose to the world. Right? But that one thought that I have to project guilt. And he says, and you can't even calculate what that's doing to you. Because it's leaving you in this depressing world. Right? Abandoned to the dark, unfairly left without a purpose in a futile world. The world is fair because the Holy Spirit has brought injustice to the light within. Right? When we go to the light within, right, we begin to see more and more and it reinforces and grows. Hey, let it grow, right? Because we bring it to the light within. Help me to see it correctly. I'm willing. Right? And we bring it in and it gets resolved and replaced with justice and with love. And then he says, if you perceive injustice anywhere, so if you notice that, there's injustice being done to you or this group, or you're angry because of what's happening to the planet, or, the whales, or whatever. All right. You see injustice. He says you need but say, and if it really gives you that response, and nobody's saying to be detached from the working of the world. If you want to give your time and effort and energy and love to a cause, fine. She's not saying don't do that. Right? Just notice that when you're starting to get angry and pointing the finger, and there's the injustice, and they have to be brought to justice. And he says, when you perceive that, he says, tell yourself, by this do I deny the presence of the Father and the Son. And I would rather know of them than see injustice, which their presence shines away. All right? And it can be very quick. I'd rather see the innocence. And I don't know how to do that. I don't make something innocent, right? I don't whitewash things, right? I just be willing to have the innocence arise in my awareness, right? I would rather know their presence, the face of Christ and the memory of God. I would prefer that, thank you. Because when I'm aware of that, injustice has been shined away. So if you perceive injustice anywhere, all right, and this is what I mean by and this is what Jesus means when he says, be vigilant. Be vigilant for the kingdom, he says. And what he means is that be vigilant when you're choosing against the kingdom, when you're choosing to, project the guilt. And no matter what, there is no order of difficulty in guilt. All right, there's no order of difficulty, oh, that was just, look at that idiot. Oh, look at that, look at those shoes. There's no difference between that and, look what this person is doing to this country. Look what this person is doing to the world. No difference. It's just a projection of guilt. And he says, so when you perceive that, when you notice that's what's happening, that's what you're doing, he says, just remind yourself, because I'm doing this, I'm denying the presence of innocence, which is always there. It's just that I dissociate from it. By this do I deny the presence of the Father and the Son, and I would rather know of them than see injustice, which their presence shines away. I would rather know of innocence and my connection to God than to see the injustice and be all bent out of shape. And it's the practice. It's the practice. So, Happy practicing. Don't call yourself dirty names. And I will see you at the beginning of the next chapter. Alrighty then. Bye.